Hey everyone, it's Stephanie again, and you are tuned into the review of Married at First Sight, Season 7, Episode 9. So, last night's episode had so much going on. I don't even know where to begin, but I'm just going to throw some things out there, and I'm going to kick it off with Mia and Tristan. So, last night had different aspects of the episode. There was times where they spent time together. There was times where they spent time separately. The guys had a event that they went to. They did golfing. The girls got like pedicures or did something at the spa, and then we had their fantasy night. So yesterday's episode was kind of about intimacy, but there was a lot that went on beyond intimacy. I feel like the episode was super long last night, or it felt that way, and the intimacy stuff kind of happened quickly at the end. So we'll touch on Mia and Tristan. Once again, they have a roadblock. Mia and Tristan, they go to have lunch with Mia's sister and father, and they're off. So they've been married for like 3.5 weeks now. They're still kind of, I think, crawling over broken glass and like trying not to scream too loud. And they're just trying to, move on, whatever that means. And so Tristan is adamant about getting together with them and having this light lunch. Light lunch or light conversation always translates to, let's keep it very surface. Let's just talk about how we've been, even though that in itself would have been like a heavy topic. But, let's talk about how we've been and what we're up to and how the marriage has been so far. It doesn't go that way. Within moments of them sitting down at this lunch with her father and sister, she blurts out that they're thinking about moving to Houston. And it really gets under Tristan's skin. If I pretty much know that everyone watching, or all of us, have heard this like phrase, awkward. And I think that if awkward was like in the dictionary, the way that we say it, Mia's face would be right next to it. Like there's a complete disconnect with what's appropriate. I think she's so awkward and so insecure or so guarded that she like doesn't really even know how to like appropriately socialize, even with her own family, obviously. So she kind of just blurts out, what she is thinking about or what she's not supposed to say. She's the person that if you have somebody behind you and you're like, oh my God, look at that person. Like she's that person that you say, don't look. And then you tell them, because if you tell them this person behind you is doing, she's the person who immediately looks and you're like, oh God, like, why did I tell her? Because she just doesn't have this like very basic awareness of like what's appropriate, especially when your husband has said, hey, like, let's keep it light. Let's keep it surface. If we revert back to the first episode, her father grilled him, her sister grilled the both of them. And we were hoping that, with her history and kind of what's happened, that they would lay off a little bit, finding out she's not this perfect little angel. And, Tristan has been kind of trotting along, trying to just be the guy that he's hoping that he can be and move forward. So it's like, it was hard to watch once again because of course her dad is kind of like uneasy about it. And yeah, anybody would be uneasy, which is why he didn't want to bring it up to begin with. But her sister grills him and is very inappropriate. I really don't like her sister. I get it. I have a sister. I get the need to be like very protective. But the volatility has got to go away. And really, it's your responsibility to check your family. Like, don't put your spouse, and this is for anyone, don't put your spouse in the position where they have to check your family about something being inappropriate. Now, if you're not around, or if there's something that's, obviously overtly disrespectful, they can set a boundary. And I think that you do need to set a boundary. But I think the first command should be you with your family, because it's easier for you to dialogue with them and kind of check them real quick so that they don't attack your spouse and your spouse doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Her sister was very inappropriate. She said something like, that's bullshit, like, which was kind of rude. You've known him for like 3 weeks. You were already kind of a jerk when you first met him. It's beyond like being protective. It's like having no boundaries, having no respect, and just asking a bunch of questions that weren't really appropriate and not really following cues. Like, you can see that Tristan was really uncomfortable and they hadn't figured it out yet. So to be put on the spot, it just wasn't a good conversation, and he was holding his own. I would give that to him, because my husband would have had less patience for that. He would have addressed it far quicker in setting a boundary. So, hats off to Tristan, kind of like keeping his cool, because her sister was completely inappropriate. And what made me even more frustrated with Mia is that she didn't really address it. She kind of just let it happen, and then it gets worse, because how could it not with her? Tristan kind of says, listen, this is why I didn't want to bring this up. Like on the low, when you like kick your spouse under the table, and says, I didn't want to talk, I'm uncomfortable. And she turns around and says, hey, let's stop, because Tristan is uncomfortable. Like she gassed up the bus before she ran over him with it. Like I don't, and that's where you're like, okay, is something missing? Like, is something up here just not connecting, almost like that light bulb that keeps flickering? Like, what is going on that you would now again put your spouse on the spot about something? And she says, well, we haven't figured it out. All the reasons, why she shouldn't have brought it up to begin with. Like, this is your family. This is your dad and your sister. For goodness sake, like, there's nothing else to talk about. There's no other light conversation you guys could talk about than literally something that you and your husband hasn't figured out, and something that makes him uncomfortable. It really pissed me off with her, to be honest. It was just like, it gets worse. We're kind of rooting for you, but it gets worse. And it just, part of me felt like, did she even do this purposely? Like, I don't want to move. She says, he's my world, or he's my family. Wherever he goes, I go. I don't buy that for 1 second. I don't think that she wants to move, and I don't think that she knows how to say that. So I think subconsciously she blurted it out so that, somebody else can kind of pour in their, opinion about it, and she just stays quiet. It's like everybody fights for her. And when she has to fight for herself, and she is alone with Tristan, she cowers into this little girl. And I don't buy that whole thing for a second. I feel like she knew what she was doing. And, it didn't work out in her favor. So let's transition to them going home. Tristan is very upset. He's frustrated because he's like, I have to baby you with the most basic things. Like, here you are, an adult. You're my wife. I tell you I want to have a light conversation. And, you don't really hear what I'm saying, and you pretty much disregard it and do the complete opposite. And then when I tell you I'm uncomfortable, you throw me under the bus again and blurt out that I'm uncomfortable. It's like the most obvious stuff you don't get. And he's like, and he's frustrated. It's elevating. Like, every single time it's something else with her. And we find that, he is, rightfully upset. And she has like no emotion. If you guys watch, she's like sitting there or standing there and just very blank, and kind of like, okay, well, I get that I shouldn't have said that, after he said it like a few times. But there's like I don't think she gets it. I don't really even think she cares. I think that she's in her head trying to figure out how to make this work for the sake of making it work. So that conversation, they kind of leave it. She doesn't really take accountability. That's another thing. Like, she says, yeah, I shouldn't have said that, or I can see that, but it's so lackluster. There is no awareness or accountability where she says, you know what, I shouldn't have said that, or just own up to it. I said it. I was uncomfortable. I didn't know what else to say, or just something. Show that you have a pulse. She doesn't have a pulse in the conversation. They leave it where it is, which isn't that great. And later on, we see Tristan go and hang out with the guys, and they don't really get into too much about what's going on with them. But when Mia gets together with the girls, they're talking about what issues they have in their marriages. And Mia is so manipulative. And we see this in another way, because she basically says, we argue, we've had some arguments, and, he raises his voice. That's all that you can say about, first of all, she says their issues aren't that big. Okay. But she basically says they have an argument, and she doesn't go into detail about what the argument is. She doesn't go into detail about her portion of the situation. She just says he raises his voice. True indeed, he's frustrated, he's animated. I don't look at Tristan as someone who yells. Like, when we're talking about people who fight and they yell and they get immediately disrespectful, I don't look at Tristan as somebody like that. I look at Tristan as like this teapot who is slowly exploding, but is keeping his cool. Like, with the stuff that she's done, he could have gone completely off the wall. And I think when he gets elevated, when he gets frustrated, you can see that and you can hear that. But the way she painted that picture is like he yells. You know, when you hear raised voice, you automatically think a yeller. And there was zero accountability. And so once again, it's like what's happening to her and not how she's playing a part of it. You know, the jail thing, someone did this to me, you know, the dating app, I don't know how that happened. I guess the internet did it. And now this is, you know, he's doing this. And even last week, I forgot to talk about when he was frustrated with her about the dating app, and she says, you know, I don't want, and he basically yells out like, I don't trust you, I don't know you. And she says, I don't want to be with someone who doesn't trust me, you know. And I forgot to mention that last week, but I was like screaming because I was like, he doesn't trust you because you have lied several times. Like, you've created this environment and you're not really doing a good job at changing that. So we always find her in this vulnerable position, and it's not going to serve her. It already doesn't serve her, but it's not going to serve her a long time. The only person who probably could deal with that is like her dad, because, you know, that's his little girl or whatever. But it's not going to serve anybody who's going to build a life with you. You know, not taking accountability, that doesn't work in any relationship. It gets old quick. So fast forward, because this is, you know, the intimacy episode. We find that, you know, they talk about their fantasies. I forgot what Tristan's was, but hers was like dressing up as a donut or something because she likes sweets. Y'all, even their fantasy lacked intimacy and it lacked depth. It showed up in the way that they both show up in the relationship. Very surface and very jovial to distract each other from the fact that they really are not attracted to each other. He was attracted to her. I don't know if he still is really with all this stuff, but she's not attracted to him, I don't think. And her words have never matched up with her actions. And here they are, you know, he comes out in these sweets boxers and suspenders, and he comes out with the thing of donuts, and she's like, I'm almost more excited for the donuts. And she is more excited for the donuts. And, you know, he's trying to feed her. There's nothing intimate about their interactions. She cowers. If you look at her body language, she turns into a little girl. She, you know, she like rushes up and hugs him like, you know, Santa gave her the gift she wrote about. He got her letter at the North Pole. There's no kiss. There's no adult interaction that's like, yes, they have this intimate relationship. So that was like gross for me to even watch, because I was like, I can't even take this seriously. This dynamic it's not honest and it's not healthy. And I don't think it's going to go well for the long term. I don't really think there are many legs here. Because like I said, they're crawling over broken glass, and, you know, they're just kind of whispering their ouch, but it hurts. And, you know, we can only sustain for so long. They literally go from like a shit show of an episode to, at the end, this whole donut fantasy. And I don't know. I think the most exciting part of watching them last night was the donuts as well for me. So I guess Mia and I have something in common. So that's Mia and Tristan. I don't know what to say about them. I mean, what I would take from them is or tell people is, you know, look at that as a horrible example of how not to set boundaries with your family, and learn that you need to set boundaries on behalf of your spouse with your family in order to create that relationship. You know, she says something like, you know my family, and he blurts out, no, I don't. I've met them twice in 3 weeks. You know, you have to really set the tone for how somebody is going to treat your spouse and how they're going to welcome. And you really have the power to kind of shape the way that relationship goes. So that's what I would say from Mia and Tristan. That's kind of like the nugget that I could share with them about them last night. So that is Mia and Tristan. Amber and Doug. So Amber and Doug, you know, they had highs and lows last night as well. You know, Amber's still kind of figuring out like her insecurities and how to really deal with them. Dr. Jessica comes and visits and kind of like gives them some, you know, examples of how to deal with it. First of all, she lets them both share how they feel. And that's always a great thing, because when a mediator is there, we show up differently. We show up with our Sunday best. And so we can hear each other differently because we're now listening, even if it's for the sake of looking good to the third party, which it often is. So they were able to share how they feel. If we take it back a little bit, once again, Amber's insecurity kind of shows up. So she talks about not being a natural blonde, which, you know, you'd have to not be watching to see that she wasn't. But, you know, she talks about not being a natural blonde. They're at dinner, they're, you know, having a good time. And she says, you know, I think my hair's starting to break off. And he's like, why? And so she talks about how she dyes it and stuff like that. And once again, she's ruminating with this whole, you know, I think he wanted somebody else, which the irony of it all is she shows up and, you know, I think he wanted like a brunette and, you know, I'm a blonde, and girl, no, you're not. So you can be what he wants if you're really wrapped up in that. But he's kind of saying, oh, you know, typical guy, like he's saying, you know, stop dyeing your hair. If your hair's falling out, stop doing what's making it fall out. Like it really isn't that much deeper. But Amber, because she is so hyper focused on not being what she thinks he wants, etc., she thinks that, you know, he's trying to change who she is to make her who he really wants her to be. So what's happening is the narrative that she has created in her mind, she continues to find ways to validate that. So I always say, you find what you seek. So if I'm looking for something and I've made up my mind that that's what it is, then I will definitely find things to validate how I feel. So something so simple as him saying, well, you know, why don't you stop dyeing your hair? In her mind, she's like, well, yeah, of course, because you'd want me to go being a brunette because that's what you really wanted. And the crazy thing is, it makes sense. Like we will make it make sense. That's why communication is so important. Because just because you may not communicate something doesn't mean that I haven't created this story in my mind. And we all do it. So you have to interject with honesty and truth. And so she overreacted once again. And I was kind of like, okay, you know, like, when is this going to kind of end? So she spends time with the girls. They kind of talk about what's going on. I think Mia had an actual good point in this episode, you know, regarding Amber and kind of what she's going through. And she, you know, Amber even looked to Danielle for advice, which kind of fell flat because Danielle didn't really have much to say about what they had going on. But, you know, she shared with the group how she was feeling, and the insecurities, you know, continued. So one of the good tools that Dr. Jessica gave Amber was to say, you know, because you're so insecure, you kind of make it this thing that it really isn't. So take a step back and kind of see it for what it is instead of running with the way that you already feel. So a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, what's the point of a therapist, or what's the point of a life coach? And, you know, that you just talk and they don't fix anything, and etc. First of all, I just want to interject. Therapy is like an active participant sport. So a lot of people will come to me or a therapist and say, fix me. You know, they may not say it out loud, but their attitude shows like, well, you're supposed to know it all. And it doesn't work that way. You have to engage in the process because it's ultimately about you. So that person can guide you through that and help you to see things that you can't, which will, you know, help you have that whole awareness and change. But people don't fix, like no one's this psychic or God or whatever who can change you. You have to be a part of that change. So what I love seeing is that Dr. Jessica gave her that tool and saying, like, take that moment, take a beat, think about where that's coming from when you hear something, and identify whether it is real or it is something that you're making off of emotions. So it's like cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's really challenge our irrational beliefs. Is it emotional or is it logical? Logic we can work with. Emotion, making it logic, is where the problem lies. So her fantasy is him, she jokingly says dressing up like a Viking. I don't know if that was real or not, but her fantasy is, you know, being surprised and kind of like just going with it. So he creates this beautiful moment for her. She comes home. There's a letter on the table and it's like, get dressed, meet me at this address. So she's so excited and she goes downtown. She gets dressed up. She's waiting for him. He comes with like a horse and carriage, and it was so sweet, you know, and she's so excited. He's so happy to see her. You know, he in the confessionals talks about how attracted he is to her. And, you know, he also again, he kind of talks with the guys about the insecurities and kind of what they're going through, but he's like powering through it. So they get into the carriage and she's saying, this is so beautiful. And this, you know, this is like my fantasy come true. And he like kisses her and they're drinking champagne and it's a beautiful night out. And he says, you know, like, you smell so good. And then says like, it's almost a little overpowering. So here's where like Dave really irritated me. Like, oh my God, he really irritated me because that didn't really need to be said. So here's where you also have to take ownership of assisting your partner in overcoming their challenges, because you're a unit, right? So a lot of people will scream, well, Amber needs to stop being insecure, etc., which she does. She has her own process. But when you're in a marriage or in a long-term relationship and you're building a life with someone, you guys are now each other's accountability partner. And so if I know that there's an area where you're insecure, even though it is your job to work on your insecurities, it is also my job to commit to helping you work on your insecurities by not validating or adding to them. So let's flip that. Dave, stop being a jerk. You didn't need to say that. It was very like, it's almost like, and here we're going back to him being very regimented and, you know, very like inflexible. Like he had to say that. And I think that he has zero awareness about what that really meant for her. But it's like when your spouse makes a meal and they're not the best cook, but you eat it, it's not the best thing, but you know you're not going to die from it. So you're like, thanks, babe. You know, you find ways to validate that. Thanks for your efforts. You know, this was so thoughtful. I really appreciate it. You know, you don't have to give it 5-star on the Zagat guide, but like, come on, you don't have to also say, this was great, but next time use, you know, like there's a time and a place. Maybe in a few days when you see them cooking again, say, babe, how about you add a little salt or blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, next time you see her putting on perfume a few days from now, say, babe, you know, you don't have to spray so much. You smell naturally good. Or, you know, even if he says like, sometimes it's a little too much, in a different moment where she's not trying to impress you and begging for like, you know, validation, whether that's good or bad, but we all know where she is, that would have been appropriate. But saying it in a horse and carriage where like everything's going so well, it's like, learn when to shut up. That's for both people in a relationship. You have to learn when to shut up. You have to learn that everything doesn't need to be said. And in that moment, I felt like it was a jerk move. Like, you don't have to say that. You literally, if you're suffocating, we've all suffocated from someone's cologne, you turn to the other side and you just let it be. If you're going to be her husband and help her work through these insecurities, then part of that is validating her good space and not hyper focusing on every little thing she does when you know she already does that. So both people have a responsibility. It's not just Amber anymore because she's married. Just like if Dave had something he was highly insecure about, it would be his job to really focus on his insecurities because it's him. But as his helpmate, as his wife, as his whatever, if they're not married, but they're building a life together, it is also her committing to helping him get through that and helping him avoid further insecurities by pointing them out. So that really frustrated me with him because I was just like, you know, like there's a lot that she has going on. There's also a lot that he is going on. I think they both have issues they need to work on. And I think Amber's insecurities are like under a spotlight and his are a little like in a dim room. So we hyper focus on him or on her, but like there's a moment where he kind of ruined that. What I loved and what was so amazing about having these tools, so we go back to the tool of what Dr. Jessica said, is she used it. So that's the beauty of having a mediator or having a life coach or a relationship expert or therapist, whatever, because you can take these tools and change the course of your day, your moment, your life. So she remembered. She could have like went crazy in that moment because we saw those eyes like, oh my God. And I was like, okay, this night is ruined. But she said, you know what? I'm going to remember what Dr. Jessica said. And I'm going to not get so caught up in my head about what I think it is and what he's saying and what my insecurities are. And I'm going to take it for what it is. And then she made a joke. And she said, like, I should have put a little more on. And, you know, and then they moved on and had a beautiful night. Like, I could have hired a skywriter to say yay Amber for that, because whether we think it's a big deal or not, for her it's a big deal. For where she is, it's a big deal, you know. And so we have to give her kudos for showing immense growth. She could have ruined that night with her response, and he would have, you know, reacted, and it could have been a horrible experience. But she grew up immensely in that moment with something that she struggles with. So, you know, if you don't think it's a big deal, just give her a little grace, because we all struggle with something that for other people is like, so what? And so for us, if we have like a hallelujah moment about it, it's a big deal and it changes our life experience. So if she can keep doing that, I think that's going to be great. And I would love to whisper in Dave's ear, don't give her reasons to continue to do that. Like, just sometimes just take a chill pill or several. So that is Amber and Dave. I think if they continue to grow, I think that there is room there, because he really talks about how much he cares about her and how attracted he is to her, and how, you know, he, even last night he said something like he thinks about building a future with her and their kids and so on and so forth. So I hope that's genuine, and if it is, then I think that they can go the distance if they just kind of work out their nuances. That's the flip side of, I think, getting married later. So I think I'm listening to this book called When, and it's basically about the science of time, but coincidentally yesterday they were talking about the timing of getting married and how it affects, you know, the marriage. And there is, you know, negatives we always think with getting married too young, but there's, and then we always say the older you are, the better. But sometimes when you get married a little too late, whatever that may be, that's perspective. But like when you get married a little bit older than the average, you know, you're more set in your ways. So it's actually quite difficult to loosen the reins on your regimen and really allow somebody in. So really, if they allow themselves to continue to be malleable, then, you know, it could work out. So that is Amber and Dave. Last but certainly not least is Bobby and Danielle. So Bobby and Danielle, they continue to coast this week. They have a good time together. Bobby has basically admitted, you know, in the confessionals that he loves her. He's in love with her. He's kind of scared to pull the trigger because Danielle is kind of guarded with her feelings. And so that might be a problem, because he's going to seek that out for validation. And I think that's normal. I don't think it's like seeking out validation that's unnecessary or out of bounds. I think it's normal for him to want that validation that her feelings are, you know, his feelings are returned and she's gaining feelings. Like, we all kind of need that. You're not going to, you know, go out with someone or spend time with someone or marry someone and not want their emotions returned. And so she is very guarded. And so I think that if she doesn't give him something, he will get very thirsty, and that would be problematic. And then he may get insecure, because he mentioned that, but he kind of runs past it. You know, he meets with the guys. Once again, nothing's wrong. Danielle meets with the girls. She basically says they're in a great place and they haven't had one argument. And so the other girls, being in the relationships that they are in, don't really buy it. And I think why they don't buy it is because Danielle, once again, is very guarded. She's not like, okay, we haven't had any issues and we're getting along really well. I mean, I know they'll come up, but for now, so far, so good. It's like, no, we don't have any issues. So it's very like inauthentic. Like, I would not want to hang out with her because she's like the one who wants to know your business, but like, she's not going to tell you hers, which is fine. But then you can't sit with us because you're just never really going to talk and you're never really going to create, you know, a sound relationship. And she's doing that in her marriage. Like, they're operating, you know, one thing she says before I go on, one thing she says that I really like is she didn't want to take on too much of the girls' problems. So she gave advice, but she said, listen, you know, the marriage that I'm focused on is mine and I'm not going to overwhelm myself with other people's issue. And I think that a lot of us can take heed to that. It's basically because we sometimes take on other people's issues. We bring them to our own home, or, we see something going on in somebody else's and we find it in ours. And so sometimes a lot of times having that attitude is like, listen, I have to worry about me and my four walls is probably the best long term. It's just how you do it. So I do like that she said that. But fast forward, she's kind of, very guarded in every situation. And, she's even guarded with her family. So there's stuff there that I'm not getting. The issue that I have with Bobby and Danielle, because I think that they do get along well and they really do care about each other, is that they are operating in a surface way. So they're still, they're comfortable with where they are and they're happy with where they are, which is great. But there is a depth lacking there. And so what might be concerning is that when some dysfunction is revealed, and it could be something so basic, but when it's something that is like not perfect, it'll be a bigger deal than what it really is, because they've operated at this space at a 10 for so long. Like if you operate at a 10, well, when a 9 shows up, oh my God, what a disgrace. But really, A, y'all weren't really at a 10. You just felt like that. And B, a 9 isn't bad, but it's there will be different facets of the relationship that you see. And I hope that they get beyond just, oh, everything's so great. And it's fine if it's great. They get along well, but allow themselves to be themselves enough to see each other in every light so that it could really be like a deep, authentic relationship. And so when the stuff that comes that isn't so great shows up, like they can deal with it and still, like each other or enjoy each other or love each other at that 10, So that's my concern for them. Other than that, they are Danielle and Bobby. We're not expecting much from them. Even the fantasy part, I think it fell asleep because it was her in a t-shirt and a baseball cap, and she came out in a t-shirt and a baseball cap and then just went into, it was just like, oh my God, it was so boring. So, that's fun for them, I guess. There's something sweet about their innocence, but at the same time, it's like, I just think that, real relationships have many facets. And even sans the drama, because we don't need that, just two people who have never met before, to not have any type of, I wouldn't even say disagreement, but any type of awareness that everything isn't perfect, like tells me that they're walking on eggshells, even with each other. I think they're just like, they do enjoy each other. They do get along very well. They're similar enough to have this very even keel, calm dynamic. I think they can totally grow into loving each other, but I also think that it's like, oh, the boat isn't rocking too much. So I'm going to do and continue to do what makes this boat not rock. And that's just not life. So once again, we will see how Danielle and Bobby end up. So that is the review for this week. Looking forward to chatting with you guys. Also, if you guys have any questions, just general relationship questions, feel free to ask. It could be general relationship questions or questions regarding relationships in relation to this review. I can do a separate video on that because I answer a lot of questions, and I'm going to start doing like video answers just so it could be like a lot easier and quicker, and we can have a dialogue about that. So thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and I will see you next week. Everyone have a great week.